So, Julienne, we are here today. We're going to talk about you.
Thank you. Hello.
How are you today?
I am well. I'm happy to be here and being part of this experience with you. So I'm
Well,
ready for anything. I
we
think
got
I'm
a
ready
New
for anything.
Yorker and a Texan.
What could happen?
What could happen? Yeah, I was reading some of the stuff. You've got some great content out there, and I was reading through some of it. And I want to throw a question to you, just to kind of open it up, using your term about telling the story of you. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that as one of your, one of the tips about getting real. Be real, right? Be
Mm-hmm.
real, get results. So, give us a quick story of you. Tell me about you.
All right. Born in Brooklyn, raised in Queens, New York gal, and fast forward, ended up in HR for many years after doing a bunch of different things. And sooner or later, I realized that I like telling stories at work and biographies because, as you know from your HR world, we have to find ways to get people to show up and listen.
Yeah.
And sometimes that requires feeding them, and other times, basically having some good conversations. But the story of me started when I realized I didn't really give that full credit that I thought when I was fully evolved, mature, professional, I would only speak in PowerPoint ease and bullet
Right.
points and everything. And a couple years back, I got feedback that the stories matter. The stories had people learning, laughing, paying attention, and engaging them at their work in a happier way. And it made life more fun. And once I got that feedback, it was like a gift because I really started to pull in other aspects of my world and just got comfortable. So started using more humor, writing, speaking, staying in stages in front of huge groups, looking at them looking at me, and just saying from the heart. So using everything about my background, having fun, and getting to meet people like you.
Well, we have a common, I guess we have a common friend, Jerome, Jerome Duroy,
Mm-hmm.
Duroy. Um,
I know.
and I know that, obviously he's a big fan of storytelling.
Yes.
And you mentioned that same term. Did you have to, I mean, that's a deliberate act, though, to kind of sit down and write down your stories or kind of vet your stories to make sure that you've got somewhere that it's leading you somewhere. Was that the beginning of it? Did you just start going, okay, I've got some stories that I think lead to, can have some good life lessons in there, or could be relevant to people, or could land with people.
It I always learned with stories as a kid. I was very shy, introverted, so that's how I learned. That's how I listened. So fast forward when I became an interviewer and did a lot of recruiting to build teams. I basically had no budget most of the time to do anything constructive. So I
Been there.
used
Yep.
stories to teach the staff how to interview. But the most important part where I took a leap of faith was when I was interviewing candidates. And you know that traditional questions like, tell me about something you want to improve.
Yeah.
That's so canned, and everybody's ready for that. I tried something different in interviews. Basically, I shared um, a question that was my 2020 question. Tell me something that went horribly wrong,
Uh huh.
but you learned a lesson and you embedded it into your existence moving forward. My example that I would share in the interview and got people to sit back and go, I can't believe you're telling me this,
Wow.
was my abysmal challenges recruiting talent when I was in retail at night in a very competitive market where I thought at some point they're breathing and living. How much trouble could they possibly get into in 2 hours? Well, apparently a lot.
Yeah.
And building on that, I used that example to coach managers when I went internally to start recruiting and coaching staff that were management and retail, that you didn't want to do that. And I used some of those stories in interviews. So here's what happened. Besides the shock of your interviewer telling you a real story and not just a canned presentation, people opened up. They relaxed. I got to hear things I normally wouldn't. But the good news was when they left me, because we had actually developed a rapport and some understanding, I was able to represent them more effectively when it came time to meet the manager. Because as you know, those interview follow-ups are never in the moment. They're usually maybe a week, a couple of weeks, a month, depending on what kind of level of search you're doing. And it really started to show. And then the other good news is when those folks got hired, I was able to advocate for them because I knew a little bit more of their grit.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the other things that happened is one person I interviewed that never got to work with me, we became lifelong friends and we're working on projects now.
Oh, is that right?
Another woman referred me to a big consulting project when I got out because she remembered, that I was the real deal. So that was not my plan to build my sales force of people that would advocate for me, but it was an upside of the fact that I showed up as I was and took it from there. And it makes
So,
it more enjoyable.
well, that's enough. You're talking about authenticity, and when you're the interviewer. You're usually 9 times out of 10, you're kind of in the power position. So
Mm.
the person is on their guard, and when you let your guard down, that gives
Mm-hmm.
them an opportunity. That's great. That's a great example of how you can do that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think a big part of that too is you mentioned you use humor. If you're self-effacing, and you can show that, hey, I've been there. I've done some really stupid things, and believe me, I've got a whole list of those things. It does make people feel like, okay, I don't have to give a perfect answer here, or basically the perfect answer she wants to hear. I'm going to tell her
Mm-hmm.
the real stuff.
And we look, it's a small world. I mean, I come from New York. It's millions of people running around on any given day commuting. It's a small world, and you meet people, you keep crossing paths. You might as well try to be as respectful as you can and enjoy that rapport. Do we like everybody we meet? Do we agree with everybody? No, but just mix it up a little bit, and you'd be surprised where they show up again. So thank God.
Uh, I love hearing you say that, because we could use a little bit more of that. I mean, we're so polar divides right now in so many different ways, and can we just chill out and respect the fact that we've disagreed with each other our whole lives and been able to get along. It's just we're in this pressure cooker now, and I think a lot of people have just lost the talent of being tactful, and we need to get back to that. So I love hearing you say that.
And it's sometimes simple things. Like I don't write a book or I don't write articles because I want to preach at. I want to teach myself and remind myself. And it's simple things. Somebody's stopped being heard, somebody's angry, and then we stopped listening. And I'm not saying I'm going to agree with everything you might say or somebody else, but if I can just wait,
Mm-hmm.
listen, and acknowledge. It's a step in the right direction
Yeah.
and get context. Again, may not move forward to agree, but context helps. The backstory helps. And those little moments start to build something. At least that person feels like, well, that person gave me the time of day, basically.
Yeah.
Happens all the time. We have so many different interactions in a given time. And I'm not saying we're ever going to clear all our reactions, but if we can interrupt it, give ourselves pause, we're pretty good. So there's a whole stream of things attached to that, but I'll let you ask the next question. So.
No, I was just going to say, could you imagine if we talked to each other at work like people talk to each other on Twitter? It would just be a horrible place. Somehow we know how to rein it in and talk to each other professionally until we get behind a social network, and then it goes crazy. But that's a
Mm-hmm.
whole nother deal. Okay, so you had this experience. You got into HR, and then at some point you decided, okay, I've got something here, or somebody maybe pointed it out to you. You've got something here, and it ended up in this playbook that you wrote, Learned It in Queens, which is what a great title, Learned It in Queens.
I know.
Look, I know. If I could say so myself, I know. No, that's great.
No, it's express. It started off as an express. Okay, so I'll tell you the expression was always when I had common sense reaction to something was I learned it in Queens. Like it was like a no brainer, not rocket science, common sense. And then it evolved because we're in a very sports competitive
Yeah.
type of country. You got to make it into a playbook because then it sounds like there's some practical things. And then the man who helped edit it and reconceive what was originally a speech into the book says you're talking about digital communication. You have to put it in the title. So I'm like, we added that. So it became the longest title on the planet.
Yeah.
But the title really started as a complaint, the whole book, because I before I got an opportunity to talk about this topic, to write a book, I was walking around complaining in New York to myself, not out loud, but that we had mutated into a head down, living in a bubble species, that we had stopped having eye contact because we're not getting videotapes, which is a pity because you see all my expressions. But there's phone, that we had phones. You go in everywhere and everybody's got their heads down, and like the cops that have their heads down. Everybody has their heads down no matter where you are. You go to a restaurant, people have their heads down. And I thought, that's an issue. And the reason the book came to me is I started to look at every conversation, every time I got into there was conflict at work, 9 times out of 10, it was because people stopped listening, like you said, or they read into what they received in an email, and then there was text or whatever instant message was happening, and usually what's wrong. And they had projected all their stuff into the message and just simply overreacted.
Yeah.
So overworked, overtired, distracted. So the book started to come out of that little vent, and then it went onto the stage, and then it turned into a book.
Well, and the title that you're talking about, Learned It in Queens Communication Playbook, Winning Against Digital Distraction. That's the entire title, right?
Yes, you will have incredible lung capacity if you keep saying that about 15 times any given day. And it's exhausting when I have to write the title into a text or an email. I'm like, short titles next time, short titles.
Well, and I might have shared this with you too, but that it's true. I wrote an article, might have been a couple of years ago, called the Look Down Generation.
Okay.
Because we have a look down generation. They're just used to constantly doing exactly what you said. And we had, at the time, our son was just getting to driving age. And we go to for about 15 years, honest to God, every Friday we would go to the same Mexican restaurant because it was our kid's favorite. So every Friday that was our family thing. And it's about a mile and a half from our house. So when it was a big deal for him to get his driver's license, we're like, all right, Jack, you get to drive this time. He had no idea how to get there.
Oh, my word.
Every time we had gone there, I mean, and it's 5 minutes. They couldn't for 5 minutes just look around and kind of take note of where we're going. They're constantly looking down. He had to GPS it, and we're just about going, oh, my God.
See, I was the other, because part of the reason I use Queens, it's a big thing because we were like the lower level borough out of all the boroughs in New York City. Like Manhattan always wins for everything. Yeah. And so we had to strive harder. And we're one of the most diverse places on the planet and in the country. So we're always trying to figure out other people's languages. And I grew up with a lot of people that English was not their first language or their first generation. So it's quite a puzzle. And the boroughs are boroughs because it was all these farming communities, they got smushed together and the roads don't make any sense. So you put that in a bunch of people, a couple of million people, crowded together, and you have some interesting dynamics, just like what we go through in our digital place. But like you said, I grew up reading maps. I grew up having to figure it out because my parents didn't have a great sense of direction. So, I was a little kid sitting in the back of the car with a real paper map saying,
well, I love
gotta find our way home. No pressure. I'm only 8, 9, 10,
Oh, God. Yeah, I imagine the drive home for you guys was a lot tougher than, like I grew up in South Carolina for a while, and it's like, okay, we're going to be on this road for 20 miles, and then we're going to take a left. That's a little bit different.
But don't you see it, like, do you have any friends and family from the East Coast? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Do you notice, like, when it comes time to go to the airport, they're all, like, stressed because they're so used to, like, having to build in, like, a whole half day or more to just get to the place. Never mind even check in and stuff. So we're all, like, a little over activated on any given day.
Well, it's like an art, too. I remember, if you know that great way to the airport, if you're from that area, I mean, it just reminds me of a Seinfeld episode. It's like, no, you got to, it's like one of those things. That if you know how to get there and you can do it in record time, you talk about that like you won a Super Bowl. So it's pretty funny.
I've had that with cab drivers, and they get crushed. I remember one driver, he thought he knew a back way, and he was so proud of it. He was like, you're gonna do X, Y, and he's like, you know that route? That was his prize route that he wanted to share. I'm like, look, and I'm from here. I know how to go back roads, industrial sections. Get me there. So it's competition. We haven't, it's what we do.
So let me ask you, because it's in the title, it's winning against digital distraction. What is something that we need to do to win against digital distraction? Is there like one basic rule that you can give us?
There's a couple. First of
Okay.
all, we talked about keeping authentic. Secondly, to manage that little dialogue that's happening in our head, that
Uh
we're
huh.
doing what's, in educational terms called transference, that we are projecting maybe another conversation, another personality onto that person. I see you, I may have had a run in with a Texan years ago, who know? And then I'm
Probably.
already writing this script about how you're going to treat me. So we have to get it out of our own head. Secondly, we have things that happen that hit our buttons. A friend of mine a few weeks ago said, if it's hitting emotional, it's chances are it's hysterical and historical, and we have to be mindful of that
Hmm.
and pay attention what hits our triggers, particularly if we're stressed. Like you and I are talking about mergers and all the changes we go through sometimes, and we're sleep deprived, preoccupied, and we're showing up in the moment not at our best and a little overextended. That's usually a trigger. So in the book, I make fun of things in very simple terms, and I liken the characters to be like those kids in the schoolyard that are always bullying you or prompting to you to get into trouble. To
Yeah.
hang on to them when you're getting your buttons pushed, and take a moment and just take a moment. Other things you're talking about, it's not rocket science. Like,
Yeah.
put things in draft, get another perspective of what your voice sounds like. Um, Another good one is sometimes it's us. We did the wrong thing and apologize.
Oh, come on.
No, I am serious. Like, we got to man and woman up sometimes and pick up the phone. And the voice makes a difference.
Yeah.
The things you're bringing up, and there's a neural science behind it, but I didn't want to make the book all about science and theories. We don't have the visual and the auditory cues. When you send a text to me and you've done something incredibly inept,
Yes.
that's the time to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
So I can hear you stumbling over words, trying to grunt the words out, but at least you've made the intent of showing up for me. If you're telling me have a nice day and you send me a happy emoji after the session, that's cool. I'm happy. That does the trick. But the bigger the issue, the more you think you're disconnecting, time to pick up the phone. Now, in this COVID land that we've lived in the last 2 years, we've had the ability to at least see visual cues and a
Mm-hmm.
voice. So that's something. But the new luxury I'm giving people sometimes is even don't even have to be prepared for your close up, but good lighting and everything. Pick up the phone and just have a conversation. Walk around your yard, talk to me, work through things that way as well. So you have options. They don't have to cost you a lot of money. I'm never going to make a few million patenting this because it's common sense.
Yeah.
And to be curious also, take an interest in somebody, a few things. You and I have come out of environments where we're dealing with a lot of crises. We need to build trust. We have to have people that listen to us and take us at our word. We can't show up and expect people to care, listen, and take us at our word if we're never there before. So you got to invest time before there's a challenge and a problem so people at least know what your values are and where you come from. And take it from there.
Well, in HR, we both have spent a lot of our career in HR. You have to be a human too. So
Mm.
they can't look at you as the HR lady or the HR guy, which I know this has worked for you too because you're a naturally humorous person. You have a gift for comedy. People love that because then you're not just the scary person. You're actually like their buddy that they know. And then there's going to be a time when that role will change, but at least you're approachable. You got to be approachable in HR. Otherwise, the only things you're finding out about are when it is a crisis. You got to be there on the front line, and sometimes that means, like you said, take an interest, be curious,
Mm-hmm.
go talk to people at all levels of the organization.
I have a lot of metaphors or expressions I use, and one of the things I coach my coaching clients and groups when they're dealing is you have to visit people in their natural habitat once in a while. You can't just hide in your office. Now we've been in hybrid, situation or virtual, but when you get to creep out of your workspaces and travel to another floor, go show up. Go to their meetings sometimes in person. You don't
Mm.
have to do it all the time. It can be once in a while, and it makes sense. Bring a snack with you. people love, food. But I, as an HR person, I had to sometimes not carry folders when I went someplace because there was, we go through patches of like intense challenges of reorganization. I was like, hey, I'm not carrying any paper. It's a good day.
Right.
Like it's simple things to put the human back into the folks. I had wanted to, I was playing with an idea of writing the original, I had HR handbook way back when, where I was,
Hmm.
the first chapter was going to be, don't eat other people's food. Like, start with the basics. Like, how hard is this?
That's
Like, you're
fantastic.
grown-ups. So,
Stop eating my food, right? That
so I mean, not mine, but others too.
yeah.
It's like, but it was but finding the humor, like you said, of the silly things can open up the door to do that. Sitting with somebody, listening to them vent for a few minutes, and then turning around and say, "Don't say that in public
Hmm.
ever again," and here's why.
Yeah.
But you're not going to get that kind of trust if you're yelling at them and talking to them in a dismissive tone. And we all have to learn. So.
Well, and you mentioned, and I think this is what you were alluding to. You didn't bring paper today or whatever. I remember I had a boss way back who was a chief people officer, and I won't mention the name because I don't want. She was fantastic in a lot of ways, but I remember being in meetings though, and she wouldn't participate in the meetings so much. She would sit off outside of the table, not at the table, maybe off in the corner, and take copious notes the whole time.
Mm.
And that is not what I want to project.
Mm-hmm.
That, because every time somebody says something, you could see, kind of look over like, what the hell did I just say that she's writing down? And you don't want to be the company narc. You want to be somebody who's actually
Mm-hmm.
contributing to the discussion. And like you said, I've been in meetings, I mean, as recent as a month ago, where somebody said something horribly inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And after the meeting, I did just what you said. It's like, hey, you might have a little damage control to do here because let me tell you
Mm-hmm.
what you said and how it could be
Mm-hmm.
received. And this is what I'm going to recommend you do it and do it quickly. So just fess up. And they took the advice because they knew I'm doing this for your good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing this. There's no formal warning or anything. I'm doing this because you might have some damage if you don't take care of it in a hurry. So it was a communication. It wasn't I wrote it down and then later tell his manager you need to talk to him and tell him he's got a first written warning for saying something stupid.
Yeah. Or put it on their performance review 6 months
Right.
later where they
6 months
have no
later.
clue and they're looking at, you need to change your attitude.
Yeah.
And you're like, excuse me? Well,
Yeah.
listen, there's tools, and that's why there's coaching, and we all need sounding boards and people to clear our minds and help us get out our own way so we can be more effective leaders and coaches. And that's why I paid money to go to grad school to find out there were theories and people that were doing things that would help me, like group dynamics training and some things I'm getting certified as we speak about how we can get clear and maintain some objectivity and use different techniques to help people listen to us. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned Jerome DeRoy at the beginning. We
Yeah.
collaborate in sessions sometimes in presentation clients. And one of the things that really appealed to me when I found out about the organization and introduced myself and got myself to their office where they had in Brooklyn a year or so ago was the fact that they have a dedication to listening and how they listen. The other thing is he didn't make me speak French in the interview, so it
That's
went
nice
really,
of him.
yes,
That was
thank
nice
you,
of him.
because I wouldn't have been successful. I hid in language class quite a bit behind the biggest guy.
That's
So,
funny.
absolutely.
So I'm going to use the. You see my background here, by the way. I've got my bricks, and I remember one of your pieces, and actually, I think in an interview you did or with Jerome, you've got a brick background somewhere, don't
I,
you?
I tried to have bricks today, but it wouldn't let me put my background up.
Oh,
I have a green screen. I've got the whole shebang lately, and I have my book cover, and I have bricks too, like you. And I was tweaking
see, this
around.
is this is silk screen.
Oh, you bought what Jerome did. See, I went for green screen like what you do in the
Yeah.
movies. That way I can pop in what works. Like I put the globe from the World's Fair for a couple of my author interviews and my book one. So I got
Yeah,
creative.
one of my guests, Andre, he figured out how to do it. I have not found anybody else who's figured out how to do their virtual background yet, but I'm going to give that little piece of feedback to Squadcast because otherwise it's a great product. But Uh,
Must
you
be
had
the
mentioned.
paid version because I'm on the free one right now.
There you go. Hey, there you go.
That must come with the price. Sorry, that's
No,
probably
you
to
know what?
edit this out.
No, no, it's funny. You get what you pay for, right?
Uh,
But you mentioned, and you were making an analogy. This is something you wrote about the bricks and mortar of conversations about how
mhm.
you stack by stack, and how I think you were prior to like going on to be a speaking at a speaking event or something. You had the bricks and got this real interesting conversation about bricks, which I thought was really
Oh
pretty
wow.
cool.
Yes, you have such a good memory. Yes, I was. I I had a Brook background I was going to use on this conference I was part of in Missouri. Like I was still in my little room, but I was talking to the state of Missouri, and it as luck would happen, the person who was going to be my wing guy and facilitator in this conference was a landscaper and architect, and he started to look at my screen behind my unsplashed photo of brick wall and tell me all about the bricks, and I was like, you never know when somebody's going to have a connection and somebody's going to speak to them. But and I remember it was right before I was going on live
Right.
to the entire state of Missouri, and I'm thinking, I guess I'm going to be talking about bricks for the next 2 minutes. Like that's a different kind of warm up. I wasn't ready for that. But bricks do feature in my life because I use the analogy of a front stoop as a thinking prompt to people to um, invest time in having one-to-one conversations. Now, probably needs some clarification. What's a stoop?
I was gonna
In
say for people here in the South, I'm
Yes,
gonna ask
yes,
Julianne
yes,
to
yes.
explain what a stoop is.
I know, and it's in the book because a friend of mine from New York, when I was creating it, said you might want to explain what it is. Um, Stoop is a Dutch word for steps, front steps. Now, the Dutch were, well, first you had the Native Americans, then you had the Dutch move in, then the British came and the Dutch left. And then lots of things always change in New York, but out of all the things we kept in New York, we've kept the word for stoop and we use it in Brooklyn and Queens. So that's the
Okay.
history lesson. And it's the place, if you go on any show or anything, you see a lot of steps in front of houses, in front of apartment houses, where people congregate and they talk and they have side by side conversations and they people watch and they make fun of people, the usual stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a learning problem for me to say that's how you have a conversation. We having a front stoop moment. We're looking each other, across a video screen. We're talking live, and it's a place to have a chance to laugh, to be spontaneous, not scripted. The thing about our digital communications, we're editing, we're scripting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you're going to say next. You promised me at the beginning there were no crazy curveballs and hardball, but I am always keep my guard up a little bit. There's an element of surprise.
Ah,
But the
you're from New
fact that
York. You're always going to be
yeah,
on
I know,
guard.
I'm gonna
You're-
watch you like a hawk, or like a pigeon. But but it's about the spontaneity of that pause of something that you didn't come on to say, and then suddenly it's being shared. And I think that's the beauty of what I'm going for. Little moments that make a difference. And I'm telling you, these happen all the time. I'm talking to people in the state of, for some reason, I'm talking to entire states lately. It's not just a one conversation for a conference. Wisconsin, and I shared my brother lives there. I have connections to it, and she started to talk about how her father came from the Bronx, and I'm like, who knew? And he went from his family being working insurance to he decided to go to Cornell University and study agriculture and how to raise cow. I
oh my
mean, a
gosh.
natural career transition from
Of
somebody who
course.
grew up in an insurance family. And I need to find out more the next time I talk to her. But it's those little moments that connect us and make life interesting and fun. So, and teach us a whole heck of stuff.
Well, and you used a term that I'm going to start using now because I loved it, and probably in interviews. But you were talking about these conversations and this particular situation where the gentleman started describing the bricks, and you said, yeah, you find what lights people up, share what
Oh,
lights you up.
thanks. Yes.
That's
Yes.
great. That's a great turn of a phrase there.
Yeah. And I think it's like I said, it's the simple thing. I have faith in folks that as we have challenges, but little moments make a difference. Sweeping changes don't happen with big initiatives sometimes. It's these one-to-one moments, these small conversations. You go into a store, you have a great interaction with somebody that you make their day, and you
Yeah.
joke about things at the cashiers. Whenever I see anybody in retail, I always remind kids, trust me, this job will come in handy one day when,
Oh,
when you have it to go as an example of what you had to endure to move to the next step. So it's those little interactions that make a difference. And you're right, it lights us up.
yeah.
When we're
We have
connecting,
this.
we light ourselves up.
We do light up, and I think that when you do that, when you see that reaction from somebody, like you have actually impacted them and encouraged them. I was talking to Andrea Butcher, who's somebody else I've had on the show. She's another one that's about encouragement, these
Mm-hmm.
discussions, these authenticity, and when you see that you've had that impact on somebody, there's a lot of satisfaction for you, but there's a lot of power that we have to do that for people, and it's really easy to do. And we probably don't do it enough to it at the workplace. Our employees, they might not get that enough, especially in a virtual environment. That
Mm-hmm.
we're not having those, we're not lighting them up. We're not giving them the opportunity. So that's my segue to the very topical discussion, because I know you wrote something about this and it's still relevant to anybody who's in HR, and it's this whole great return to the office dilemma, and
Mm-hmm.
it's everywhere. It's going to be different, maybe depending on what your business is or where you are in the country, and there's continues to be layers piled on with now with the possibility of mandates, and we've seen what's going on. Like, oh, I mean, hell, you're in New York. You just saw how 18,000 nurses
Mm-hmm.
termed and stuff. I mean, it's just things are going on right now. But what how do we what I mean, what is hot in right now for you as far as how do we get people to come back to the office, or how do we get them to consider how they're going to get people back to the office? It's such a dilemma right now in human resources. Nobody has figured it out.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of look, and I'll give you a perspective. I do a lot of listening. I have friends that range from clinical psychologists. My husband teaches and runs math department, so I've been doing a lot of listening about how people are learning to interact with each other, and then other industries like the financial services that have been mandated to come back in
Mm-hmm.
and been going in for a while. I do think we need to be realistic and set guidelines, but also treat people like adults to manage their stress. We already figured out we have done an incredible amount of work and living in our own homes with the backdrop of a lot of scenarios going on behind us. People have been managing elder care, children care, job changes, etc. To give it some time and give the expectation that, yes, I do think we benefit from being together. Now, I'm not going to romanticize this because when we were in the office, we would all drive ourselves crazy and sometimes complain we weren't getting a lot done as much as we hoped. But I do think we have to act like grown-ups and say we have just been through a momentous, life-changing experience for all of us. Take it step by step and figure out, like good negotiations, what's the ask when somebody's requesting
Mm.
why they may need to still work at home. Give themselves the opportunity to be mature about it, be as upfront as they want to be, because sometimes everybody doesn't want to show every reason why, and take it step by step. It is a challenge. I admire anybody who's navigating HR and the internal issues, but play the long game. If you're looking to retain the staff, keep them motivated. They did the right thing by us for this whole 2 years. Keep your eye on the long game, basically, is to engage, figure out what's going to help them develop themselves, and make it worth to come in. So I do think we can be a lot more disciplined about meetings, not just meetings in person for meeting's sakes. Plan and figure out what's important about that meeting. A why. Is it collaboration? Is it brainstorming around the table? Yes, that does benefit to be in person. I've done
Mm-hmm.
in-person events in the last, couple of months. Figure out what the upside is. Creating energy, creating trust, being able to turn to somebody to your side and making a comment, walk down the hallway and have an exchange. Figure out what the value add is and then figure it out. So hats off to everybody, and talk among yourselves. Chances are somebody is wrestling with the same issues. So give yourself permission to brainstorm with others and share information as well.
Well, I'm gonna do a wayback machine here for you too,
Mm,
because this has happened. We've had this is a black swan event, obviously, but we've had a similar experience in our lifetimes with as it pertains to the workforce. And you remember we had the recession, 2008, 2009,
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
and what a lot of companies did, of course, is they had to go through layoffs, and then they cut down to the bone, and they figured, okay, we can't cut any more people, so what we're going to do is cut the benefits that these people
Mm-hmm.
have, and then we are going to maybe cut their pay a little bit, and then I mean they started hedging the bets, hedging the bets. Workforce comes back to work, recession turns around, the economy starts picking up, and more people start coming back. But a lot of companies, they did not build that goodwill. They didn't have,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't, like you just said. God, I'm gonna have to write it down because I forgot exactly. I'll do it when I listen to this again.
Okay,
But
great.
we're putting money in the bank right now. How you treat your employees,
Mm-hmm.
because when we do get a little bit more liberal about how we can bring people back in the office, and maybe I don't want to say normal, but when things start normalizing a little bit, companies that treated people well during this time are going to be the companies that really thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think you and Jerome had some article together about recruit,
Mm-hmm.
rehire, and retention. Which is
Mm-hmm.
a great way to think about it. You need to treat those people that are with you now really good, because talent is scarce right now, and they're going to
Mm-hmm.
have options. They might not have options right now because everybody's maybe a little scared. They don't want to start a new job in the middle of what's going on. But when things lighten up, like this is what happened towards the end, as we approached 2020, people's turnover started skyrocketing. Tenure went down because employees were like, okay, now times are good. I'm going to go someplace where they treat me well.
Yep.
And this is the time to do it here. If you're in HR, you got to keep, like you said, keep your eye on the ball. It's a long game. And I think that's real good advice for anybody in HR right now.
I'm glad you brought up the dates because we sometimes are very dismissive of the up and coming generations, and we have been doing it, whether it was Gen X and before, all the different groups that have
Yeah.
come up. I would talk to a lot of the young people coming in when they were meeting with their, when they were hired and just chit chatting. You know where a lot of that I'm going to pick up and go and I'm not going to invest time comes from? We train them to be that way because they witnessed their parents'
Yep.
experiences. I grew up in a household, my father worked for the same company for 35 years with the New
Yeah.
York Phone Company. That was the norm. Um, I'm not saying it was always ideal, maybe from a corporate structure, but that was the norm. A lot of the young people looked at their parents working really hard, giving a lot, not being around, putting the work requirements first because they had to be competitive,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing, well, there was the payoff. Yes, we had a nice house and everything, but what was the emotional and psychological payoffs? So when they came in, whether it was grunge in the early 90s or whatever, they were like, I'm checking out and I'm doing what I like. So I think we have to look at that and again, invest and not just play lip service to it. It's tough, and there's other ways to save. I can't remember, there's a gentleman who's getting a lot of reaction now that he raised the minimum raised in pay rate in his company and lowered his so he could retain people a few years ago. And
Mm.
then when times got tough, people did take the cut and they didn't lose anybody and their business was thriving. So that can be a little incendiary example, but if you Google him, I wish I could come up with his name right now, but he's getting some interesting press that he defied the typical reasoning that's out there and he came out ahead on a few different levels. So I think getting creative, brainstorming, and figuring out different ways to save. We invest in a lot of talent, and then that's the first thing to go. And somebody else is benefiting from it. So
Yeah.
retrain, repurpose, maybe move people into different roles. We have a lot of brain drain where we're not doing knowledge management. I've worked with companies where a lot of talent and senior technical skills walked out the door and
Mm.
nobody grabbed it. And we end up spending more money hiring them back.
Well, and I had a talk that I used to give called "We're All Millennials Now," and this is before this all,
Oh,
everything fell out of the sky like this. But it was
mm,
because, like you said, that generation, they millennials, they catch a lot of heat because they were everybody said, well, they're coming in talking about what they want, and they're not going to give extended effort if they don't want to, stuff like that. And it's like, for the exact reason you just mentioned, because they realized what maybe our parents' generation and some of us didn't realize is your company doesn't love you. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that they're not your caretaker. When
Mm-hmm.
things get tough, they're a living organism. They're going to do what they have to do to survive. So we all started picking up those habits. That okay, you know what? I can demand some work-life balance or harmony.
Mm-hmm.
You can leave and go to a different employer that'll treat you better. It's not the company's not going to be your caretaker. So we all started maybe picking up some of the things the millennials showed us because before that you got a job, you stayed at that company as long. Remember how bad it was if you had jumped jobs?
I
If you
know.
saw somebody's resume, oh my God, you've been at 3 companies the last 5 years. Are you a jumper? Now it's
Mm-hmm.
like if you've been at one company for 12 years, people look at it, you're like, oh wow, you really don't know much about what's going on because you've been
Mm-hmm.
at that one little staticky place. So things change,
Mm-hmm.
and in a heartbeat.
It's interesting you say because I've worked in different cultures where 10 years was considered they were just getting started, they were newbies, and that just bent my head backwards, and I was like, oh my lord. And then where if you hit 3 years tenure, you were a trooper and super resilient because there was so much turmoil and management change. But one of the things I think will be interesting to see, particularly in metro areas, is where the commutes are tough. Like way back when I was
Mm.
going into an organization, sometimes I was at my desk at 7 in the morning. And with, I lied to myself how long my commute was. I told myself it was an hour till I did the math afterwards and realized I'd been traveling for 2 hours. Like I had discounted the car ride, the parking, the walk to the office across Midtown. I was
Ugh.
like, where did you get an hour? But
Soul
what?
crushing.
Uh, but when I went to, I did facilitated a story-based workshop about team building and communication this week, this not weekend, I'm sorry, this summer. Um, One of the comments came up from the group that people were hearing back from their kids, their little kids who were quite wise, to say, now that you're thinking about going in, are you going back to your same habits? And we're not going to see you, and
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be traveling all the time or commuting all the time. Can't you stay home a little bit? And they were being realistic to say, are you really going to go back? And I don't know if everybody's going to want to go back to the 5 and 6 days soul crushing commutes if they
No,
can avoid it.
I
Like the ones you don't see your house in the daylight
yeah.
till you have a vacation, you realize, wow, I have good lighting here. I never knew. It's like, it happened. It's like I have brilliant lighting. I just never saw it. So.
I did that for 11 years with the company that I was with, same type of thing, and the thought of it now makes me queasy in my stomach. I don't think, I mean, if we had been locked down for 3 or 4 months, the companies would have had everybody back.
Mm-hmm.
Now I think the genie's out of the bottle. And there's some companies that are either big enough or successful enough they can draw lines in the sand and they can say no, this is the way it
Mm-hmm.
is. Okay, you're going to have you can do what you want to do, Amazon, but your employees are not going to be real happy. But there's a lot of other companies, mine included, that are never going back to that. There'll be
Mm-hmm.
some sort of hybrid, some sort of combination because people have seen the benefit. I mean, there is benefit to both.
Mm-hmm.
You do want to have a reason why you have people back in the office and those sidebars, those hallway conversations,
Mm-hmm.
those types. It's great, but the thought of, I mean, now that when we start thinking about maybe we're going to go back to 3 days in the office, people are like 3 days, I mean, your perspective changes in a hurry, and one of the things our employees still to this day, when we do our little surveys, our pulse surveys, first question is going to be, y'all aren't going to make us come back yet, are you? You're not going to make us come back.
Mm.
And so it's not going to be something you can just do and not expect there to be some sort of major reaction.
And I'm not being naive because you're saying I want to come back a day and you're the boss and you want to have a
Yeah.
meeting in person and those other three people were hoping that was the day. Like, so I'm not being naive. And if you have a smaller department, if you have a lot of folks, great, maybe that works. But, and especially in HR, you have onesies and twosies, that at some point you want to just gather them around. But figure out what works and maybe give certain ownership to the departments too, because like you used to say in retail, one size does not fit all, and be creative and figure it out. And just keep asking what questions. So your questions are important to say that chances are there's more than one person that's struggling with that. And the more
Yeah.
you can call out and keep it real and, pinpoint solutions that make sense for you and your department alone, so be it. Good,
Well,
good.
and that brings us back to the ultimate point of, I think, your book and what you're talking about is these conversations and these connections, communication with people. Now more so than ever, because you do need to find out what's in people's heart right now, and make
Mm-hmm.
sure that you're being proactive about it too. And because
Mm-hmm.
we got pulled into everybody's home now. We know
Mm-hmm.
more probably about people's personal lives than we ever did before.
Good
Um,
point.
and you need to be respectful of that and realize that, yeah, when you flip a switch and say come back, I think you mentioned this earlier. What now do they have they just left if they have to be pulled out of that environment? Because I'm doing that. We're taking care of my mother, and I've got kids,
Mm-hmm.
and we've got the whole thing. There's it's a heavy load. It's a
Mm-hmm.
heavy load.
And that's why I use, like, Jerome and I and others use storytelling in our work. Not, well, some of the times it's amusing and it's an anecdote, makes somebody laugh, and the humor makes them recognize, helps them recognize something in themselves. But when we use narrative, we get to talk and connect on in a much richer or authentic level and teach staff. So
Mm-hmm.
again, tell why something's happened or what lessons learned, a great opportunity to come together and do a knowledge exchange and a learning that you can benefit. So I think you're onto something there with, you know, when we come together, when we communicate, make it something substantial that we can all benefit from.
Well, Julianne, I'm gonna let's wrap this up by reminding people the name of the book, and it is available on Amazon, right?
Yes.
With your
Amazon and on my website too, J. Ryan Partners. So together, come on, you've been practicing. You're going to say it.
yes, learned it in Queens Communications Playbook, winning against digital distraction.
Excellent job there.
Thank you,
You
thank you.
get you get A+ there for that.
Awesome. Now, what's next for you? Are you going to be speaking anywhere soon, or do you have another book coming out? Do you have anything that's top of mind for you?
Well, yes, I am speaking to the state of Wisconsin fairly soon, and then I'm always doing workshops and training and doing some coaching. So reach out to me, and we can connect. And I work independently, and I also have a collaborative group of wonderful resources like Jerome and others to talk about diversity and inclusion and equity and inclusion, I should say, and other topics. So that's good. The I've been recording me saying I'm going to write another book. Maybe not this year, but it'll have food in it because in Queens you got to eat. You got all this
Ooh,
food. So 5 times I've said this, so that means I have to commit to
you got
this.
to do it.
I got to do it and get out there and people. I miss performing in front of people too. So I've had a
Yeah.
few tastes of it. Nothing beats being in an audience and getting to see people and feel their energy. I do a lot of Zooms, but having an audience muted is not the same thing. It's like permanent psychotherapy, like you
Yeah.
just sit there and talk to yourself. And emojis are great, but they don't quite cut it. So I'm so looking forward to the moment we can get more into the in person and having fun and chat among ourselves too.
Well, somebody like you that's got this energy about him, you got to be in front of people. I mean,
I
it's
know.
it's palpable. I'll tell you what. So you say hi to Wisconsin for me. Tell them I said
Oh,
what's
good.
up from down here.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I'm going to put your LinkedIn connection. I'll put your website in the show notes. We'll get all that so people can reach out to you. And I'm just real glad we've got a chance to make a connection. I'm going to thank Jerome for that because
Oh,
I
absolutely.
found you by looking through some of his comments. Like, wow, humorist, edu entertainment. Is that what it was? Edu entertainment.
Yes.
I mean, you are a
Humor with purpose.
humor with purpose. You got a way with a phrase. Like I love it.
Okay. And
You've
I'll
been
send
great.
more people your way because I'm thinking we know people. We're from New
Yeah.
York. We've got connections.
Well, you're good people, as we
Thank
say
you,
here.
thank
So
you, thank you.
it's my pleasure to have you on, and you'll have to come back again, especially if you get this second book going.
Oh, now I gotta hurry.
I know.
Okay.
All
Okay. All
right,
right.
Julian. Have a great
Cheers.
time. Bye
Take
bye.
care. Thanks a lot.